the channel. I'm back to break down this 9-game slate on DraftKings and FanDuel. And I'm back with another Free Friday, which is a segment I've decided to do where I'm going to make my Patreon packages completely free on Friday. You can go over and visit my Patreon page. The link will be in the description, and you'll get access to all of my MLB packages, including my DFS package and my MLB Betting Package. Where you get access to all of my things, such as hot hitter StatCast data, team hitting data, bullpen data, and all that good stuff. So that'll be completely free today. It's going to be over on my Patreon, link in the description. And then I've also decided to run a DraftKings contest where I'll have 100 entries available. The top 20 are going to win, and it's going to be a $1 entry fee. Link will be in the description to that as well. It should be labeled under KJK DFS hashtag Free Friday tournament. So you can go ahead and enter that and leave some feedback on what you think about that format, because that's something I'd like to do going forward, for all of us to be able to hop in the same tournament, compare our lineups. And I'm open to anything as far as entry fees. So if you think that's good, or if you'd rather do free or up the stakes a little bit, just leave a comment and let me know what you think about that idea. You can follow me over on Twitter at KJK_DFS. And with that being said, let's go ahead and start breaking down this slate today. So as always, I like to go ahead and figure out the pitchers we're going to want to get in our lineups. And I do that by looking at strikeout rate. It's fantasy sports. We get points for strikeouts. And when looking at the leaders of the slate today, you can see that the top guy in K percentage is that in Dane Dunning, actually, but he's only coming in with a 9 innings pitch sample size. So we're going to go ahead and disregard that to start things out and look at Yu Darvish's numbers. Yu Darvish comes in with a 30.6% K rate. Looking at his splits against righties, he's got a 34.7% K rate against righties, and then against lefties, it drops down to a 25.9% K rate. So a big difference in the splits department there. He excels against right-handed hitting, so we do prefer to target him against right-handed heavy lineups. And when looking at the Cardinals lineup that he's facing today, you can see that they have, a pretty 50-50 split, but they do seem to have one more righty than lefties throwing out there. Or actually, no, one more lefty, sorry. 1, 2, 3, 4 righties in the lineup, and then they have some switch hitters in there. So pretty mediocre matchup. And the Cardinals aren't exactly the top team that you want to target anyways. So Yu Darvish has been dominant this year. He's been really good, and he comes in at an 11K price tag on DraftKings for good reason. But I do think that he's actually not at the top of my list today, because as we move further along here, we have some guys in some really good matchups. So the first is that in Jack Flaherty taking on the Chicago Cubs. He comes in with a 29.5% K rate. He's got a 33.8% K rate against righties and a 25.3% against lefties. And when looking at my team hitting data sheet and the Chicago Cubs, the team he's taking on today, we can see that they've really been struggling in the strikeout department this year. They come in with a 26.1% K rate. And then against right-handed pitching specifically, they have a 26.9% K rate. So that's really red on my sheet. And they're one of the bottom teams in the league right now in strikeout rate. So when you factor in Flaherty's numbers, then you factor in his matchup. I think he really stands out as a top play today. And then you factor in that he's actually 9.4K compared to Yu Darvish's 11K price tag. And I think I like him a lot more today. So, yeah, Flaherty, and then I'm going to get into Carrasco next. Those are my top two guys on this slate. They both come in really good matchups. And I think that while Darvish is a very good play, I would actually prefer these guys, and they're at cheaper price tags. On some sites, actually, Carrasco's at 10.2 on DraftKings compared to Darvish's 11K price tag, so it's $800 cheaper. And we're going to go ahead and move on to him. The only last thing I would touch on in this game is that there does appear to be 10-mile-an-hour winds blowing out to right center field in Wrigley Field in Chicago, which is the field that's most impacted by wind in the league, because it's just a wide open stadium, and when the wind's blowing in or the wind's blowing out, Chicago, the Windy City, as they like to call it, it actually is very impactful. So just keep an eye on the wind, because if that starts to creep up, that could dampen Flaherty's appeal. But I'm going to go ahead and say play him anyways, because with the swinging strike rate and the K rate that we had discussed, Flaherty is definitely a top option on the slate. And then the next top option, as I had discussed, was Carlos Carrasco, and he comes in with a 29.1% K rate. He's got a 30.2% K rate against righties, and then a 28% K rate against lefties. And just really good across the board. The hard contact, the slugging, and all that stuff is the greatest, but in the new majors, there are a lot of high strikeout, high hard contact guys, and it's not like he's terrible in any of those categories. So Carlos Carrasco, definitely another top option. And specifically when looking at the matchup and opening up my team hitting data, sheet over here against the Brewers. So you can see that they come in with a 26.6% K rate. And then compared to the Cubbies and the WOBA, the ISO, the slugging, and the BABIP, they're actually even worse. And then against right-handed pitching, they're striking out at a 27.3% clip. And they have no good stats. Slugging, BABIP, fly ball, hard hit rate, nothing is looking good for these Brewers. So I really like Carlos Carrasco today. And once again, he comes in at a cheaper price tag than Yu Darvish, and I think he's one of our top 2 options on the slate. I really like Carlos Carrasco, and I really like Jack Flaherty. And Carlos Carrasco comes in as a 151 favorite, taking on the Milwaukee Brewers. So I think he is your, I would say, top option on the slate. When you're factoring in the weather in Wrigley, I'm going to give Carrasco the edge. And when looking at my power rankings today, once again, this is free, guys. Go ahead and check it out in the description. My Patreon, all this stuff is free today. Go ahead and check it out over there, and you'll get access to this sheet. So, you can see my power rankings today, which breaks down my top 3 plays at each position, regardless of salary. This is matchup and hitter stats factored in. Carlos Carrasco 1, Jack Flaherty 2, and Yu Darvish 3. And that's without even factoring in salary. So the fact that my 1 and 2 pitchers are cheaper than my 3 pitcher, that's just good stuff, and we're going to want to go ahead and play those guys over Yu Darvish today. So they really are my top 2 options. Moving further along, the next guy that I would want to play would be that in Corbin Burnes, taking on the Cleveland Indians because of his strikeout rate. He comes in with a 29.2% K rate. He's got a 34.1% K rate against righties, and then against lefties, it drops down to a 22.8%. So while he is up there in K rate, and that's the reason I want to play him next, he is kind of in the mid-price range, and he doesn't have the best matchup because the Cleveland Indians are a pretty good team, and then you factor in that he's actually facing Carlos Carrasco, and I like Carrasco to get the win here, so that kind of dampens the appeal, and he's 8K. So I would recommend, getting up to that next price range if at all possible, but if you have to drop down to the mid-range, Corbin Burnes is my guy. He's my next option. And then moving further along, my top option for salary relief, well, I have 2. So we'll go ahead and do the more expensive one first. Dustin May. I would actually prefer Dustin May over Burnes, even though he comes in a 700 more expensive on DraftKings. I still think I like Dustin May more. And when you're looking at his stats, they're not really the most impressive. Over a 69 innings pitch sample size in the strikeout category, not impressive. But the ground ball, the fly ball, the walk, and the hard hit rate are very impressive. And he's a sinker baller thrower, so he does a good job of keeping the ball on the ground, staying controlled. And he's got a 2% walk rate against righties, and then against lefties, it is where it goes downhill a little bit. So he does struggle a little more against lefties. And when looking at the matchup today in the Colorado Rockies, they are throwing a ton of lefties out there, but he's a 274 favorite, and he's at 8.7. So, I do think he's in competition for Burnes, and I do think I would prefer him due to his Vegas line and being favored more. And then the very last option I'm going to mention for pitching is on the cheap end in Dane Dunning, the top prospect for the Chicago White Sox. He comes in at 5.8K on DraftKings. And when looking at his numbers, we're only dealing with a 9 innings pitch sample size, but he's shown his talent early on. He had that 40% K rate, 33.3% K rate against righties, and then a 50% against lefties. So that's most likely you're just dealing with a couple at bats there against lefties, if not just one. And he is my next option. We don't have a lot of data to go off, but we know he's a top prospect and he's supposed to be the real deal. And he takes on the Kansas City Royals today, who aren't the most threatening lineup. So yeah, that's my overall breakdown of pitchers. And let's go ahead and start breaking down some bats we're going to want to target in our lineup. And I like to do this by shorting my sheet by Sierra. If you've tuned into my videos in the past, skill interactive ERA is a stat that I weigh heavily when figuring out the hitters that we're going to want to target. And if you're a patron of mine or you're interested in becoming one, you will notice that I've started to add these built-in notes. When you scroll over a stat, it will actually pop up and explain what exactly that stat is. So if you go over to ground ball, you'll see, ground ball percentage equals ground balls and per balls in play. So I'm trying to add that stuff in. Right now I only have it on this pitcher data sheet, these first categories, but that's going to be added into each and every stat on my sheet. So something to look forward to there if you are a current patron or you're becoming one. But yeah, enough of the rambling about that. The bats we're going to want to target today. The first guy that stands out to target is that in Kikuchi of the Seattle Mariners. Kikuchi's really struggled since he's come over to the majors. You can see against righties, he's really bad. He's got a 522 slugging, which is just terrible. That's beat right on my sheet. And then against lefties, he's actually not terrible. But the thing that really stands out to me today, and I actually went ahead and made this a note on my power ranking sheet, is that the Texas bats in this game are completely like dirt cheap, and they're taking on Kikuchi, who has less than impressive numbers. And when we're looking at the Vegas lines, you know, they only have a 4.25 implied run total, but they have a top prospect in Loidi Tarveris, who's projected to lead off in this game, and he's only 2K on DraftKings, which is minimum salary, which is absolutely absurd. If he's actually in the leadoff spot, you're going to have a lot of interest in him as a leadoff guy. And then when you're looking up and down this lineup, I mean, these guys are all in the 2K range. So Tavares, Kinner Falfella, Jose Trevino, Nick Solak, all of these guys are really cheap, and they're taking on a guy in Kikuchi. When looking at his stats, you know, I had already mentioned I like to target, you know, pitchers with bad Sierras, and he has the worst one on the slate. And then his splits against righties are very bad. So I think these righties in this Texas lineup are really interesting today because they're all dirt cheap, and they're all in a very good matchup. So they only have a 4.25 implied run total, which is a little bit of a disclaimer, but it's daily fantasy sports, and we have to play guys with price tags attached to their names, and I think that's a good place to start for salary relief. And then second on the list is a team that we're going to want to target that is going to cost a lot, and they're in a great spot in the LA Dodgers, taking on Antonio Senzatella. Senzatella, when you're looking at splits against righties, he is not good, and then against lefties, he's not good at all. You know, the ground ball and the fly ball stuff is good, but he's really just bad against both sides of the plate. He doesn't strike anyone out. He has a 15.1% K rate and an 8.1 swinging strike rate, and then his ERA it comes in at a 5.33. So he's just someone you're going to want to target. And the LA Dodgers are obviously an elite lineup, just a filthy team, and they come in with a 5.72 implied run total, 274 favorites, and I'm going to have a ton of interest in stacking up these Dodgers today. You know, Mookie Betts, Corey Seager, Max Muncy, Cody Bellinger, the elite names. I love that 1 through 4. And then the bottom of the order, these guys can all rake too, and they're at cheaper price tags. So AJ Pollock, Jock Peterson, Chris Taylor, Gavin Lux, and Will Smith. I really do have interest in all of these hitters 1 through 9, and I think you can take the throw in the expensive hitters approach. You can blend them in with some salary relief guys, or you can just stack the bottom of the lineup for a complete salary relief stack, and that has a 5.72 implied run total. So you gotta like these LA Dodgers today. And yeah, you know, obviously the 1 through 4 range is my favorite. Bellinger, Muncy, Seager, Betts, but I guess I can't put enough emphasis on they're in a good spot. So if you want to just stack up the bottom for salary relief, that's fine. And fit in some of those top pitching options that I had already mentioned in Carlos Carrasco and Jack Flaherty. So Dodgers, you got to have a lot of interest in today. And then this is when things get interesting, because I actually, the next spot that I'm going to target is in the late game, and the line doesn't really back up the statistics that I'm looking at. So I guess I'll start out by giving you guys a little sneak peek on my betting package real quick, and then we'll break it down from a DFS perspective, because I think the total in this game is a little on the low side. It is in San Francisco, and the hitting, the ballpark isn't the best hitting environment. You know, San Francisco is a big stadium. It's not really a hitter's paradise, so to speak. But this game's only coming in at 8.5 implied run total, and both of these pitchers have very less than impressive stats in Taylor Clark and Tyler Anderson, and then both of these bullpens are very bad as well. So when looking at the line on DraftKings, the over is at 8.5 at a 121 line. So this is my betting package where I break down, you know, my top picks where all the data matches up, and this is my pick of the day, and that factors into you know, our DFS lineups, because I do think that these guys are at some cheap price tags, and I do think that there could be some runs scored. So once again, you know, disclaimer: San Francisco is not the best environment, but if we're looking for some stacks that are sneaky, they're going to be low owned. And this is a place that we can go, because Taylor Clark's numbers are not good. He's taken on the San Francisco Giants, which isn't the best lineup. But looking at his splits against righties, he has a 5.26 slugging, very bad. 39.2% hard hit rate, very bad. The fly ball and the ground ball stuff's very bad. And then against lefties, it doesn't get any better. The only thing he's good at is the ground ball category. But I think we can target these Giants in this late game. I think they're going to be low owned, and I think that they could be sneaky. So the guys we're going to want to target, my top 3 options would be Yastrzemski, Alex Dickerson, and Brandon Belt. But I also do like the rest of this lineup. I would say my main interest is the 1 through 5 range. So, Yastrzemski, Dickerson, Longoria, Belt, and Flores. You could go ahead and stack that range up. And then the bottom of the order is more sneaky, but maybe stay away from that. Prioritize the top of the lineup because these guys are already going to be loaned as is, I think. And you can just go ahead and stack up these top options. And then on the other side, the Diamondbacks side, you can see they're taking on Tyler Anderson, who is also very less than impressive against righties. He gives up a 456 slugging, really not good at anything. The ground ball rate is absolutely terrible. And then against lefties, he's actually even worse. He gives a 546 slugging, 381 WOBA, just not good at all. And I think Tyler Anderson's a guy that you can target today. And I think he's the guy you can target with really anyone in the lineup, but obviously we do prefer the top elite bats. So I would say the 1 through 4 range. That's the one thing about these lineups. They're not exactly like powerful. So for as far as DFS, you're probably going to be getting your points from like singles, doubles in the gaps, and guys advancing on base, steals, and all that fun stuff. So it's going to be slowly but surely. But if you're looking for some cheaper stacks to throw in that are contrarian, I do think that these two teams could pay off today. So that's something I just wanted to go ahead and mention. And then, as I had mentioned, all my Patreon packages are free today. Link in the description. Go ahead and check out my MLB betting package where I give you my reasoning, and then I also give you access to my data sheets where you can go ahead and break those down. So you can analyze the stats and make your own bets. And that's my spot of the day. I think the over is going to hit in that game. But moving further along, bats that I really like this next game, these New York Mets get to take on Jake Arrieta. And when looking at Arrieta, he has less than impressive stats. The ground ball and the fly ball rate's pretty good, but then against righties, he stands out as good, and lefties is where it starts to stand out because he has a 497 slugging, 366 WOBA, a 17% K rate. So it's really not good against lefties, and I think we can have a ton of interest in these New York Mets lefties today. So Nimmo, Conforto, Dominic Smith, Robinson Cano, Jeff McNeil. I like all these guys. And then you can go ahead and throw in the 2 righties blended in between them and JD Davis and Pete Alonso because they have a ton of power. And if they're able to get Arrieta out of this game, they're going to get to take on the bullpen. So while he is better against righties, I do think you can include the righties in your stack, but we do primarily want to target these lefties. And then not to mention that winds are blowing out to right field at 10 miles an hour, and it's 81-degree weather. So definitely a lot of interest in these Mets. Definitely a lot of interest in lefties. My top options are Nimmo, Conforto, Dominic Smith, and Robinson Cano at the top, and then Jeff McNeil. I literally have interest in every single lefty. Just the splits stand out, and it's definitely a spot that you can go today. And then lastly, my last spot that I want to target is that in the Chicago White Sox. And when looking at Singer's numbers, he's really struggled against right-handed hitting, which is great because these Chicago White Sox have some righties with a lot of power. So he gives up a 509 slugging to right-handed hitting so far with a 48.7% hard hit rate and a 352 WOBA. Very bad red across the board there against righties. But then against lefties, he's not much better. So we can target this whole team as a stack, but I really like these righties with power. So Tim Anderson, Jose Abreu, Eloy Jimenez, and Luis Robert, and then obviously Edwin Encarnacion. Those guys are really standing out today, and I do think that this is a great stack. And when looking at my power rankings today, you can see that, I do have Yasmani Grandal topping the list at my catcher position. I have Jose Abreu in second, right behind Max Muncy. And then I have Tim Anderson in second, right behind Corey Seager in the shortstop position. So definitely a ton of interest in this this game, and definitely a ton of interest in the Chicago White Sox specifically, and then the right-handed hitting. And then my cheat sheet also breaks down, there are some good options in each tier. On FanDuel, you can pay up for Jose Abreu or go down to Grandal. As I already discussed, I have a lot of interest in those two. And then I like Jose Abreu in my utility spot as well. And then same thing over here on DraftKings. I'm liking Grandal as a pay-up option at catcher. And then while I don't have Tim Anderson as a shortstop on DraftKings, that's more because the top elite tier of shortstops are kind of bunched together today on DraftKings. And I would prefer Corey Seager, but Tim Anderson, definitely a great option, and I have a ton of interest in these Chicago White Sox overall, and I definitely have a ton of interest in the right-handed hitters specifically, so I think I made that clear. But that is my breakdown for bats on this slate today. A quick little overview of what I've gone over for today's slate. I really like Carlos Carrasco a lot. Corbin Burns is a second option you could drop down to, but I don't know if I'd go there because you could pay for Dustin May. These New York Mets lefties I like a lot. The Chicago White Sox I like a lot as a full stack, but I also want to point out that the righties are really in a good spot. So guys like Jose Abreu and Eloy Jimenez with a ton of power, like them a lot, and then Tim Anderson. Jack Flaherty is a pitching option I really like today. I had mentioned the matchup in the Chicago Cubs and their strikeout rate. Gotta like him a lot. These Texas Rangers, specifically on DraftKings, are really cheap, so we can go ahead and throw them as a cheap stack. Taking on Kikuchi, who's not the best pitcher, and the Mariners bullpen, which isn't a good bullpen. Definitely have to have interest in these right-handed hitters. The Los Angeles Dodgers I like a lot. The lefties and the righties, I like everyone in this lineup really. But you know, your premier stack is Mookie Betts, Corey Seager, Muncy, and Bellinger. If you can fit that in, you're going to want to do that because that's going to be awesome today. But then you do have some cheaper options at the bottom of the lineup as well for some salary relief. And then this last game in this Arizona Diamondbacks and San Francisco Giants, I do think is a sneaky spot for some bats. Based on salary and the site you're playing on, you know, if you can get these guys for cheap and you can get them as a contrarian plays, I do like them today because while it's not the best hitting environment and while these aren't the best hitters or the best lineups, these pitchers both stink, and I think they can get some singles, some doubles, some triples, some home runs, you know, a blend. They're not going to just go out there and start hitting bombs. Hopefully they do. Hopefully I'm wrong, but I think some stacking, you can have those fantasy points add up, and it can be sneaky on this slate today. So that is a breakdown of my slate. Go ahead and check out my Patreon package. As I mentioned, it's free today. The link will be in the description for my Patreon page. Go over there. You can get access to my Mlb DFS spreadsheet right here, where you get access to my hot hitter StatCast data, team hitting data, bullpen data, power rankings, and cheat sheet. All free today. Free Friday to give back to you guys. I appreciate you guys tuning in and supporting me. Please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and hit the notification bell so you won't miss any new videos that I release. I wish you all the best of luck tonight, and have a good one.